The Bleacher Report app is your destination for sports. Right now, the NBA's heating up, March Madness is here, and MLB is almost back. Every day there's a new headline, a new highlight, a new moment you've got to see for yourself. That's why I stay locked in with the Bleacher Report app. For me, it's about staying connected to my sports. I can follow the teams I care about, get real-time scores, breaking news, and highlights all in one place. Download the Bleacher Report app today so you never miss a moment.
Okay, guys, welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones. Me, your adventurous podcast host, Tony Evans. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for listening for all these episodes. Do like and subscribe. Do leave a review. As you know, it helps people find me and my show and more of my stuff. Anyway, enough of that stuff out the way. This is the episode I sort of promised on the social medias for last week, but sadly, as we know, we lost Phil Campbell, so I thought I would play my interview that I did with him on my birthday of that year. Last year, in fact, it was released on my birthday this year, in fact, which is a nice serendipity, and he never got to tour because it got delayed, and then he passed away. So, here we are with Judas Priest's Nostradamus. Now, I've mentioned this before in my episodes about my favorite Judas Priest albums. I will put a link in the show notes below. This album gets a lot of bad heat from a lot of people, but bear with me, guys, because you might see it in a different light by the end of this episode. I hope so. If not, and I can't change your mind, well, that's your choice. I'm not gonna try and force you to change it. Picture the year. It's 2008. It's quite a long time ago now. It's almost 20 years ago. And the sea of metal that was being released at that time, in that year, there was a lot of albums that came out, a lot of bands that formed. But when I look at some of the albums that were sort of wishy-washing around in that time, I think we were lucky to have Nostradamus, to be honest with you. Here are some of the albums that some of the bands and albums that were coming out then. Because we had, Elstorm had its first, Captain Morgan's Revenge. We had Avantasia with the Scarecrow. Bullet for My Valentine, Scream, Aim, Fire. Big hit for them, very big hit for them. We had a reissue of Live After Death by Iron Maiden's reissue, of course. We had Warbringer's War Without End. That they're actually playing in Canberra in a week or so's time. I'm looking forward to that. So there's a few good. Hellhammer had Demon Entrails. Venom had Hell. I'm trying to see here other bands. This was just in the first few months of the year. Death Angel had Killing Season. We had 9 Inch Nails with Ghost 1 to 4. All right. Meshuggah had Obscene, Buckhead, From the Coop. Some of these are big classics now. They weren't really big when they came out. Camelot's Ghost Opera, The Second Coming. Dream Theater's Greatest Hits. Strapping Young Lad had his greatest hits as well. 1994, 2006. But in original songs, we had Sword, Gods of the Earth, brilliant album. Highly recommend that one. Children of Bodom, Blood Drunk, another great album. So there were some good ones coming out, right? We had Blephera with Bondage, Goat Zombie, another good album. I can tick through here, Def Leppard had an absolute stinker of an album in Songs from the Sparkle Lounge. We saw them on that tour here in Canberra. It was a good show, but that album is awful. Deicide's Till Death Do Us Part. Testament's The Fulmination of Damnation. 9 Inch Nails' A Slip. So not a bad, mix of different Sabaton's The Art of War. We have Gamma Bomb's Citizen Brain. Quite a lot. I'm going to click through. Motorhead's Motorizer. I think we have Whitechapel's This Is Exile, which is one of my favourites. And then we got Lamb of God with Walk With Me in Hell. I'm just going through the list here, guys. Soulfly's Conqueror. We have Dragon Force Ultra Beatdown, if you're into that sort of thing. Slipknot's All Hope Is Gone. And yeah, that to name many. Metallica's Death Magnetic came out that year as well, actually, which is something I completely forgot, to be honest. I'm just going through each month of each on this list here. Obituary had an album out. The Haunted had an album out. Metal Church had an album out. Bring Me the Horizon. Megadeth anthology, though. Trivium had an album out. There's quite a lot of people. AC/DC had reissued had Black Ice out. Cradle of Filth, Godspeed and the Devil's Thunder. Brilliant, another good album. Satyricon Age of Nero, I like that album. Where else have we got? 6 Feet Under's Death Rituals. I just interviewed them, actually. Pig Destroy had an EP with Natasha. A much forgotten band, Ed Guy, had Tinnitus Sanctus. Yeah. Arch Enemy, Tyrants of the Rising Sun. So, quite a lot of good albums coming out, but not albums, but nothing, that was mind-blowingly brilliant. So it was a bit of an okay year. We had bands reformed like At the Gates, Carcass, Crocus. They were reformed there. We lost bands. Quite a few bands disappeared over that. Ministry broke up in that year, which is a real shame, because Celtic Frost did as well. Yeah, I mean, they probably needed to, because over the time they had sort of changed so much. But anyway, different conversation. What I'm trying to come across is that there was some good albums, there were some good bands, but it was a bit of a sea of nothing burger. The early 2000s albums were sort of we were living in a hinterland when not a lot was really great, and what was great was sparse, as I said. And the bands that I've just mentioned, the albums I've just mentioned, um, are a few of the big ones that I would, bring to the table to say, yes, look, there is a few there. All right. I mean, lots. I mean, there are more than that, of course. There was hundreds of albums released that year, and I'm sure there are some you're going to say, but you didn't mention, Winds of Plagues Decimate the Weak, or Northern's N, or Evulite's Slania, or Tumira's Delusions, or whatever. There's always going to be someone I'm not going to mention, but the ones I sort of scooted across. Some of them good, some of them terrible, as in, Def Leppard's album. Some of them absolutely amazing for me, albums of that year for me. Um, like exactly, like Children of Bottom's Blood Drunk. I think it's a fucking great album. Very much underrated, unfortunately. And of course, My Dying Bride's An Ode to Woe, which is also brilliant. And Deicide's Till Death Do Us Part. Not the heaviest thing they ever did, but certainly one of those great albums. And I even forgot to mention Moon Sorrows, Tulminrisky. Can never pronounce that. 9 Inch Nails, A Slip. I'm not a massive 9 Inch Nails fan, but good album. So there's lots and lots. Okay. So comes the album, out comes Judas Priest. This is their time. This is their album. They're releasing this year. And out comes Nostradamus. Now, a band as big as Priest can have moments of artistic hubris. All right, it really can. It has the license, shall we say, to play with music in any way they choose to do so. All right. Now, you might look at me and say, and point the finger at me and say, in the same way, you could say that Metallica has made some artistic albums that do go down a cul-de-sac and are probably missed sidesteps. Now, the same thing is to be said with this album and Judas Priest. Judas Priest, though, to be honest, are a more they're a bigger band in its time history, not as in popular opinion or albums sold, but in the time they've been making music. And come 2008, they've been around a long, long time. They've done all sorts of albums. They've had split ups. They've been back together again. Halford's left, Halford's come back, all sorts of stuff. But this is an album that I think was the album they were always destined to make. Now, you might again look at me with some sort of quizzical eyes and say, "What do you mean?" Uh, British Steel was the album they were destined to make, and yes, they were, and it is the album that really is their artistic pinnacle, in my opinion, or their heavy metal pinnacle. But this is an album that lets all the members of the band, and particularly Rob Halford, show his hand at what he does well. Now, Rob's got probably one of the greatest voices in rock history. It still hits the notes now, even though he's in his 70s. This is an unbelievable operatic album, and I think he has that voice that would suit uh, big theatres, operatic operas, little musicals, and so on. But obviously, he's very much a very big operatic sound. Operettas is what I was trying to say, not musicals. Scrap that, Tony. Cross it underneath. I meant operettas. Anyway, so when the idea was muted around by their manager, they thought, why not? I think they just thought, why not? Let's have a go at it. We've never done a double album before. This is a triple album. We've never done a concept album. This is a concept album. And I think it played really well into the zeitgeist of the year that it was written, because it is about looking to the future and to the annihilation of the human race and how we're going about that, and predicting wars and megalomaniacs and plagues and all sorts of things. And we just come out from a very difficult period in the early 2000s. 9/11. We had, we've got the Iraq and Iran war. We've got all sorts of things going on that, every time you looked over your shoulder, you thought it was going to be the end of the world. The Y2K bug, very similar to what's sort of happening now. This is why I feel this is quite relevant for now. Now, Nostradamus himself, if you don't know who he is, if you're um, new to music and haven't read the story about the album or just don't know who he is, I'll give you a quick rundown of who Nostradamus was. Nostradamus, or Michel de Nostradame, born December 1503 and died July 1566, usually Latinized his name to Nostradamus, was a French astrologer, apocrypher, and physician, and reputed seer, who is best known for his book Les Prophéties, published in 1555, a collection of 942 poetic quatrains allegedly predicting the future events. So, he predicted, apparently, if you read it, people read into it, he predicted Hitler, he predicted the First and Second World Wars, the plagues. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you will read or read into his work is very much you have to see what you want to see in it, if you know what I'm saying. He was very much connected with uh, occultism and almanacs, and almanacs were sort of a book that you would bought that would give you the when the seasons would change, when to plant your crops. It gave you medicinal advice and so on. He has been sort of sanctified as this wonderful, amazing prophecia, right? Because it, as I said, it's easy to read into his work. He prophesied the French Revolution, all sorts of things. I personally haven't read any of his work, but it has been sort of re-released or rewritten into English because it was written in Latin originally, so that you can read his work. And you can read it anywhere online. You can either buy copies of it. You can go on to websites. They have it all over. There are a lot of people who who like conspiracy theories and doomsayers will enjoy his books and his writings. Okay, he claimed that he predicted the Great Fire of London. It's claimed that he predicted Napoleon, Adolf Hitler, both wars, the nuclear destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the moon landing, the space shuttle Challenger disaster, Death Diana, Prince of Wales, September 11 attacks, on the World Trade Center. All these things have been read into his works. Again, it is all subjective, okay? So don't scare yourself by reading it and thinking stuff is going to happen, because I think a lot of it actually is pretty well much disputed, of course. But there is no doubt that his story uh, and his prophecies make for great drama and and a backdrop to operatic, heavy backgrounds. I mean, Judas Priest will not be the first band to have used uh, Nostradamus as a focal point or a lyrical counterpoint for a concept of their album, but they are, I think, the first to do a full concept album. Now, the first side of the album is all of his, well, it's based around his prophecies. Okay. The second part of the album is more about his life. I saw them on this tour in 2008 in Sydney. Me and Dave went and saw him. They were meant to be supported by the Cavalier Brothers, but they couldn't get visas, so end up being down. Phil Anselmo's down. So, needless to say, we sat in a bar for that one. But anyway, it was very funny, actually. Long story. Dave booked the hotel. He said, "Oh, it's walking distance to the arena." No, it wasn't. It was up a motorway, and it was about almost an hour's worth of walking, because we had to go through all these different suburbs because you couldn't walk down the hard shoulder of a motorway. It was hilarious, actually. We got there in the end. It was a good show. It opened up with um, Rob coming out the floor in this sort of very sequined cowl and hood and cloak, and he played the first only two tracks off of the Nostradamus album on that tour. Interestingly enough, the album did so poorly by critics, not by sales, interestingly enough, but it was not received that well by the fans, the older fans and the critics. So they only played two tracks off of the album, which we'll talk about. We'll get to that when we get to it. It was a it was a good tour. It was a great set. It was half full, sadly. It was, as I said, it was a time when that people had lost. I don't think there were a lot of touring Australia bands were touring Australia a lot. We weren't getting full sets. People were, I mean, it was 2008, so there was also the financial crisis in America. So money was really tight. We had the banks collapsing and businesses collapsing. So for us to sort of raise that money was always a little bit hard. So I think that's why a lot of them um, ended up um, not coming over, or only coming over on a short tour or whatever. Anyway, it was a good show. I really enjoyed it. Oddly, it was the days of your iPods and stuff, and I had my iPod, and on my iPod I had put a running set list of my favorite Priest songs, and honestly, outside of the two Nostradamus tracks, it was almost track for track what was on my iPod, and so like that sort of blew my mind ever so slightly, because it was like, oh, it was a psychic moment. I really felt connected. It was brilliant. Anyway, Nostradamus. Let's get on to that. So 2008, the band had been a bit of a hiatus. They had a few things going, and their road manager says they're on tour, and they're like, "Why don't we build an album around prophecies of Nostradamus?" And they all said, "Well, let's give it a go." It was their 16th studio album. It's their first studio double album, not triple album. Sorry, there is a triple album special version of it on CD. Their first concept album. It was recorded between 2006 and 2007. And it was produced by Glenn Tipton and KK Downing. So both guitarists produced the album. It was the last album that KK Downing appeared on before he split from the band. It was released on Epic Records in 2008. And KK Downing left the band in 2011. Okay. They toured with Motorhead, Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell, or Heaven and Hell, I should say, and Testament to promote the album on its release. I didn't, as I said, we didn't see them over here with that. We saw them with Down. And yeah, I said originally concept was by Bill Kirbishley, their band, their tour manager, their manager, and it was at the end of their 2005 Estonian tour when they were in Estonia, when he sort of mooted the idea. It's been recorded on a double CD. It was released on a special triple vinyl. That's what I was trying to remember because I have it somewhere in my collection. It debuted at 11 in the US. It sold 42,000 copies in the US alone during its first week of sales. So it wasn't a slack or a slouch in the sales numbers. It just wasn't what the band's diehard faithful were expecting. Right. It was. It's a shame, really, because you'd hope that fans would give a band some leeway to have a little bit of creativity after 16 albums, but fans get like that, don't they? AC/DC fans the same, Priest, Maiden fans, they all want Run to the Hills, they all want Back in Black, they all want you know, British Steel, don't they? They want Motorhead, they want Ace of Spades, they want the same and again because it means so much to them and they love it so much. But there are also sides of fans like myself would have loved the idea the band originally wanted to play on its first run through the album in its entirety, but it fell flat, as I said, with the audiences, so decided only to play 2 tracks, and that's Prophecy and Death, which is, good on them. I still think that's a shame that they were not allowed to give themselves their full attention to this album. You don't go into an artistic project as grandiose and as dramatic a change in direction as this without really wanting to do it. It's not like they were sitting around one day in their in their back rooms in their houses going, "All right, I don't know what to do. What should we do?" That was a Birmingham accent I meant to do. Not from Birmingham, pretty close by. And they go, "Oh no, let's make a Nostradamus. Let's do it." But why would you waste money, energy, and time and production on an album you didn't want to back and unfortunately couldn't back? And in hindsight, it's actually one of a modern masterpiece, in my opinion, anyway. But that's because I like progressive music. I like long stretches and storytelling in music. So for me, it actually was a real piece of a musical, a bit of fresh, breath of fresh air in the year of 2008 when all these albums were coming out. They were either extreme or they were fast. They were typically heavy metal. This was something slightly different. Again, it's a 4-letter word that people don't like to mention. It's very proggy, right? And had they released it now, when sort of longer pieces of work are very de rigueur and prog is very much not a dirty word, I think that it would have seen a different audience and gained a different audience, and I think it probably would have gained a much more appreciative review. Anyway, we're going to go into the break now. Before we go to the other side where we talk about the album itself, the tracks, the music. I know this has been a long one, but hey, I'm not going to cut. I hate cutting things short. I'm going to blather, whatever you like it or not. You can always skip, I suppose. No, don't skip. I'm only joking. Right. coming into the ad breaks, we're not having any ads this week. We're going to have a little bit of a surprise, a little bit of a treat. I get a lot of music on my inbox, a lot of agencies, record labels, every day. It's to the point where I can't even keep on up to date with it and keep on top of it. Anyway, as you know, I'm a big lover of the underground. So I decided that this week, when the band Dark Flow sent me this at their album to review, to listen to maybe talk about, I thought, well, when the agency that was dealing with him, Imperative Music, actually Gilson from Imperative Music, I shout out to them, very, very good at what they do, said, could you maybe talk about this band? I thought, why not? I'm going to put a track on it, because actually, when I listened to the album, it sort of felt very apt. So the album itself is called Imminent End. It's produced by Andy LaRocque, and it is a Swiss dark shock rock band called Dark Flow. Now, they're not a massive band or an underground band. They have their moment. They have an audience. But I think it sits perfectly here for us and this story in this episode. Let me just give you a little bit of an idea of what the band is about, okay? This is what the press release sent me. Dark Flow is a Swiss shock band founded in 2020 by Sean Horror and Flow. With a growing international recognition, the band has become one of the leading metal acts of its region, the French part of Switzerland, known for its theatrical vision, conceptual storytelling, and powerful stage presence. Dark Flow has released 2 albums, Insane Circus in 2023, featuring Snowy Shaw on drums and mixed and mastered by Andy LaRocque, and Imminent End in 2025, last year, produced in collaboration with Andy LaRocque. The sound blends heavy thrash and symphonic elements with a strong cinematic identity, positioning Dark Flow as a rising force in modern shock metal. So, I thought the track I'd put on, which is very, very apt, I might add, for this one, is... So without further ado, I bring you Dark Flow and Press the Button. You make the connections between Nostradamus, Wars, and this song, a shock, horror, Swiss underground band that I've actually really liked this album, and I hope you do too. Take it away, Dark Flow, with Press the Button.
Time transmission.
Welcome back, guys, to part 2 of Judas Priest Nostradamus. That was a treat for us from Dark Flow, the Swiss shock metal band, and the track Press the Button. Very apt, I think you might find, for the end of the world calamitous stories that Nostradamus was to bring us, and what Judas Priest was to set to music. So, I hear you crying to me, talk about the music, talk about the music. Yes, well, as I said at the beginning, the first part of the album, first side of the album, is is the predictions. So you have the album is Dawn of Creation. These are the tracks for disc 1. Awakening, Revelations, for the Four Horsemen, War, Sands of Time, Pestilence and Plague, Death, Peace, Conquest, Lost Love, and Persecution. So you can see where it's sort of coming from in that respect. They're very punchy, very biblical, very revelation type concepts. All right. The opening music, the music itself. Okay, let's go talk about music. Let's step aside. The music itself for me is very one motif. So they take the one motif. It's very much this sort of strong operatic vocal line that Rob gives us, and they push this to this great, grandiose, pompous largesse of music. I think one of the downsides to it for fans is it's not your traditional head-bangy kind of music. It doesn't do that. This is a tortured, technical, dark, layered, and interesting musical score that we get here. You know, right from the sort of small track of Dawn of Creation right through to the much more verbose and large Pestilence and Plague. You get that it's a relatively new sound for Priest. I think they're pushing the boundaries of what their band does. But there are times on the album when you do get hints of previous Priest incarnations. Sorry, you've got on Pestilence and Plague. It sounds it could be off the Sad Wings of Destiny album quite easily. It sounds like they've a leftover piece of music from that album. Then you have War. War to me has a very Wagnerian, very ring cycle dynamism to it. It's extremely verbose is a good word for it. You know, you can picture in the music the landscapes of the tortured and destroyed landscapes as the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse come riding over the horizon with War at the front, spreading his destruction throughout the path ahead of him, right? You know, these pieces of music, they really are perfectly suited for Rob's voice. Um, it, yeah, it's. I think it's one of the better albums to show off his range than some of the later stuff, because the much of some of that middle period albums like Turbo and all that, Turbo Lover and all that, they they're not quite sure where they're going. Of course, you have the genius of Painkiller and things like that, but this is slightly more um off kilter, because you've got galloping music going here. You've got palm muting. You've got atrocious, so outrageous solos that you're always going to get with KK Downing. When with KK Downing is on the guitar, you know, you're always going to get that when you've got Glenn Tipton and KK Downing mixing up, right? Always. So you're going to get that sort of outrageous sweet picking, the bluesy sort of soulful guitar parts. You get Ian Hill's very staunch, nothing overly verbose, nothing overly grandiose or technical in his bass playing style. Is just holding down the Scott Travis drum beats that fire through the back, of course, and then Rob on top with these beautiful, beautiful octave changes and the way that you can enunciate and bring a word to life in a way that no other lead singer, I think maybe probably Bruce Dickinson, can come close to it, but even Bruce is not on the same league as Rob, and it does. The first part of the album, so the first side of the album is actually my favorite. I think I go back and play the first disc more than I do the second, to be brutally honest, because I think they lose their way slightly in the second. But I'm that's letting them. That's not a truism in some respects, because one day I'll put it on and I will absolutely love side two, and then I'll put on again. I'll put it on. I've played it a dozen or so times since owning it. I have it on vinyl and on CD, and I think I've got a live version of it somewhere as well. Not the whole album, just that tour. And so it depends on which mood you're in and what you're looking for. If you're looking for a Priest that's more uh, accessible, more genuinely old school, more has a bit more pop sensibility in a heavy metal kind of way, then side two is your side, okay? And not playing side one and going straight to side two, unless you are going to give yourself over to 102 minutes of music. Go to side two if you don't want anything uh, challenging or anything progressive or anything slightly different. It is an insult to the album, because you should listen to both sides. That's the point. The artist has produced his music. Stick with it. Listen to it. Don't walk away because you are letting yourself down and the artist down, in my opinion. Right? It is a passion project. It is misguided. It is overly operatic. It is overly self-indulgent. But so fucking what? To to be honest and rude and truthful, I don't often swear on this show, but it fucking hell annoys me. You know, because after 16 albums and 40 odd years of recording, you have the right to do what you want to do. You don't need to sell a million records because you've already sold millions and millions of records. Let them do what they want to do. Sometimes an album, even though it's a passion project, will go off and change the whole course of a band's direction. Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick is a good example. You know, it was a pastiche on prog, and that's the album that I'm most remembered for, which I feel very, very oddly irritates me. But anyway, again, we're going off tangent. Right, so you can go and listen to the second side. All right. The second side, track wise, we have Solitude, Exiled, Alone, Shadows in the Flame, Visions, Hope, New Beginnings, Calm Before the Storm, the title track Nostradamus, and Future Mankind. Now, as I said, you still get the same musical motifs that are coming through into side two, but it feels that it genuinely feels that they were sort of running out slightly of ideas at a point when we get to sort of Shadows in the Flame. All right, now that's again probably just my take on it. It feels like the second side is a little thinner to the first side, and honestly, they probably could have got away with a single album for it. But the title track is actually really catchy, right? Calm Before the Storm is got some nice sing-along parts in it. There are bits that are a bit lighter, like Shadows in the Flame and Visions and Hope. Of course, if you follow the story, if you read about Nostradamus, you will know that the first side is the vision, is the prophecies he made. They're very tightly connected with Revelation, by the way, and the Book of Revelation, I should say, not Revelations, because that's incorrect. The Book of Revelation, and then of course the other side is more his life. You know, he was a solitary figure. He was famous, but he was also reviled. He was revered, but he was hated. Um, you know, he had very interesting connections with the royal family, the family at the time with Charles the Fifth of France. You know, he was being persecuted for heresy by the Inquisition. But neither his prophecies or astrology fell into the brackets that they would wanted. The church were, of course, very much against him because there was some anti-Catholic vision, Catholic views that he perpetuated in and around 1561, where he was imprisoned for a little while, but he was released on royal decree. In the end, he suffered from gout. So he was a sort of a existential loner, if you know what I mean. He bequeathed his property, which is 3,444 crowns, to to his wife, pending her remarriage, and that's 300,000 US dollars today. So he was, he wasn't all bad, right? He just was a little bit odd. You know, did he take hallucinogens? Probably. Who knows? He probably, I'm sure he did. The Prophecies of Nostradamus compiled his collection of major long-term prophecies. The first installment was published in 1555, contained 353 quatrains. The third edition had 300 new quatrains, was reportedly printed in 1558, but now survives as only as part of the omnibus edition that was published after his death in 1568. This version contains one unrhymed, 941 rhymed quatrains grouped into 9 sets of 100 and one of 42 called centuries. So, he was a prolific writer, absolutely prolific, and, had a very tortured life. I mean, you put that particular time in history, uh, if you are to claim yourself and to have visions, you are going to be burned at the stake as a witch. Now, just because you were burnt at the stake, not only witches were burnt at the stake, males were burnt at the stake as well. Okay, all right. Now he came out. He actually said, "I would not be foolish enough to claim to be a prophet." He said that some prophets predict the great and marvelous things to come. For me, I'm no way attribute to myself to such a title here. So he was very self-effacing, didn't think himself as a prophet, but he had these visions. You know, it says, although my son, I have used the word prophet, I would not attribute to myself a title to such a lofty title, right? Uh, so this is what the second part of the album is about. I've gone off a tangent, I apologize, but his life story. So his solitude, he's life alone writing his stories, even though he was married. Uh, Exiled, so sent away, completely ostracized. Now, ostracization is not exercising a large bird. I just thought, in case you want to know that, I ostracized my ostrich. Shadows in the flame. So where he was seeing his visions, he often saw them, according to sources, looking into the flame late at night in a darkened room. Visions, hope, of course. Just because you see visions of sad and dark things doesn't mean you don't have hope, and he would have had hope. Of course, then there is his personal life, new beginnings, his marriage, his private life, of course, because he's uh, an occultist, and uh, a uh, a foreseer of futures, doesn't mean he's also not human. He was married. He was also, he was also a healer, a hands-off healer. Presumably, he did a lot of healing around the plague period of time. And he had his own salon in Salon de Provence, in the regional capital of Aix-en-Provence. Finally, in 1547, he settled in a house that exists today, where he married a rich widow named Anne Ponsard, with whom he had 6 children, 3 daughters and 3 sons. His wife acquired a 13th share in a huge canal project organized by Adam de Capone to create the Canal de Capone to irrigate the largely waterless area that they lived in, which then gave them lots of money. So he had a large family. He was relatively wealthy. He had rich patrons, but he was also living on the edge, a dangerous edge of a time when being slightly different would have got you um, tortured and executed. This He had married previously to a lady possibly known as Henrietta d'Onconsey, whom he had 2 children, and that wife and children died in 1534, presumably from the plague. So he's had 8 children, 2 wives. So he's lived a very um, large life. So new beginnings, So his wife has died, his children have died, he's remarried, he has 6 children, and then he has the calm before the storm. All right, the calm before the storm. The moment that he realizes that he is having these prophecies, that he does feel different to everyone else, that he is seeing the evils of the future. As we said before, predictions of 9/11, of Hitler, World War One, World War Two, all those sort of things that are supposedly read within his texts. Now, also, which I didn't mention, he's from a Jewish family that had converted to Christianity, or Catholic Christianity, a generation before he was born. Uh, so, which would have caused inner conflict in him, I'm sure, after seeing the way that his Jewish heritage was being sort of thrown and destroyed and considered evil. He had a lot of as I mentioned before, he had a lot of wealthy uh, patrons. So Catherine de Medici, one of the wealthiest women in the world, was a fan of his work, and he eventually died from an edema developed in his gout that he had, which is usually a sign of a good life. Gout, red wine and cheese, a bad diet. He died on the 1st or 2nd July in 1566. Now, the reason the song Nostradamus is comes about in this part of the album is because he's now portraying himself. He knows who he is. He had to drop out of university because of the plague. He's not one thing nor the other. Is he Christian? Is he Catholic? Is he Jewish? Is he a academic? Is he a healer? Because he was also an astrologer. He wrote almanacs. Right? Where is he going? Protected by wealthy people. Otherwise, he probably would have been put to the stake. He's now telling the world, "I am Nostradamus. I am who I am." And I wrote Le Prophétie, and I am Nostradamus, and it's quite a beautiful song. It's quite poppy, actually. The musical notes in it, the solo is one of the best. In this is fantastic. The atmosphere behind it is that one again that simple and easy to listen to motif that they're dragging from the very first note of dawn of creation right until the very last note of future mankind, because the last track, Future of Mankind, is telling you, these are my prophecies. I have been tortured by solitude. I have been exiled. I feel alone. I see my prophecies in fire and shadow, and my visions are there. I have hope for a new beginning. There is only more to come. I am Nostradamus, and this is what's happening to the world. And Rob Halford portrays that in such a brilliant way. The band musically, they make great operatic music. They really do. This is as good, and I'm gonna say this, if you listen to this episode this far, then good on you. But I think this is as good as, and in the same kind of bravery as the Who's Tommy and um, and Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime. These albums were coming at a time completely against the flow of populist music. Tommy in the 60s, it's pushing against the "I want to hold your hand" set. Not "I want to hold your hand" set, but "I want to hold your hand" pause set. And Operation Mindcrime came out when we were listening to, there was a lot of very heavy, very fast, very aggressive, very one-centered direction metal, right? Thrash, traditional heavy metal was all about um, achievement, women, speed, fun, exhilaration, get it over and done with. Yes, we had Iron Maiden, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the same time, but that one I've already talked about before. This one is more, Operation Mindcrime for me was a little bit more on the ball, because Maiden were always going to head towards that kind of thing. It was the way they were making their music. But when Queensryche came out with this album, this was completely genre smashing, and really helped, along with Seventh Son, to create the prog metal subgenre that we love so much now. So, sum up. Great album. Please give it more time. If you feel so involved, do read up about Nostradamus as you're listening to the album. It's not an album that's going to give you lots and lots and lots of historical notes. You're not going to come away subconsciously knowing more about the man and his prophecies. It's more about a feel, about a person, and the torturedness of his soul, of which Rob and the boys always have done so well, is adding drama and color and texture to their music. And I think this is a brave hubris. Yes, bit long, maybe could have gone with one album, maybe two separate albums, but still an absolute masterpiece in my opinion. So I'm going to go back and listen to it again. Pull out my Judas Priest tour shirt from that particular tour, the Nostradamus tour. I've got it around somewhere, and enjoy myself. Why don't you do the same? Thanks for staying around for over an hour with me. I know that I do blather on. I hope you enjoyed the single by Dark Flow. The album is available on all streaming platforms. It was released last year in 2025. I think you're going to love it. If you like any of that sort of Euro shock stuff, you're going to love this. Anyway, bye for now. Thanks for staying with me. Thanks for enjoying the show. I really, really appreciate it because we're coming up to our 5th year now, and I cannot believe that's the case. Bye for now. See you next week.